Despite the rain, the United has won some
I was
85
obsessed with
pounds after
journalism
eating
very
3 meals a
young,
day.
and I loved the storytelling aspect. I did a lot of red carpets for a long time. I did a live talk show on the OWN network. I had another live talk show with Fox. Interviewing is still the love of my life. I was raised, church every Sunday, church 3 times a week probably because I had parents who were in ministry. And I'm in my late 20s. I remember calling one of my spiritual mentors at the time and being like, hey, like I'm dating this guy and he's so lovely, but he's not Christian. So, like, I don't want God to be mad at me. And she said, I think you have a very parental relationship with God, and I think you need to explore that. And I just broke wide open.
Talking to Stacy Ike. Stacy, thanks so much for making some time. I know we've been trying to get together for a few weeks now. Thanks
Sure.
for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's take it back to your youth. Where were you raised? Where are you from? How are you raised? Let's give us a story, the elevator pitch story about your youth and your background.
Mm. Yeah, I was raised in Houston, Texas. I'm in a very big family. I have four younger siblings. I'm the oldest of five, Nigerian, and I was raised in a Christian household. I was obsessed with journalism very young, not recognizing that's what it was called. But what I recognize now is I was just obsessed with people and curiosity and storytelling and all of our different paths and what people were, using to guide them through this life. And that actually like turned into journalism, but from that's what I was always really curious about. And so, yeah, that's a bit about like just how I grew up. I was a huge sports kid until I wasn't, and then I was a huge arts kid, and I was like, oh, this fits more, because art just includes so many different dynamics of storytelling to me. Not that sports doesn't, but just the way that I felt very connected to. And yeah.
So that interesting interest in storytelling kind of led you to the University of Missouri, which is actually a great journalism school. Where did your career kind of go after that?
Yeah, yeah. So I went to the J School at Mizzou, which was a phenomenal program, very difficult for a reason because it was, you really learn the ropes. And I loved the storytelling aspect, but I recognized about senior year that I was like, I don't think I like the news aspect. And I still think about that today because like when I'm watching the news, I'm like, I don't think I could have done this. So in the same way, anyway, there's different shows now. But at that time, it was very news focused and I didn't feel like I fit in. And so after that, I moved to Los Angeles. I had a pit stop in Australia for a little bit, but then after that, I moved to Los Angeles to just try to see what it would be like to be in the entertainment space. Felt like my personality matched more. I wanted to see how I could create real communication intimacy in a place that like, was a little bit more glitz and glam according to what we think. But I felt like I really wanted to figure out like what's behind the lens, what's behind the, person, the glitz, the glam, the whatever. And that was kind of where my journey took me. I did a lot of red carpets for a long time. I did a live talk show on the OWN network. I had another live talk show with Fox. And yeah, just kind of like interviewing is still the love of my life. Like just being able to interview people and really see their stories, get curious about them, get into an intimate conversation. That's like one of my favorite things to do. So that's kind of where it led.
And so what are you doing these days? Where does that kind of lead you to these days? Are you still doing red carpets and kind of entertainment focused journalism?
I wouldn't say not necessarily entertainment focused now. Now I have a podcast called Human to Human. I parlayed my experience through red carpet because, like, one thing I recognized after doing red carpets for a long time was that I just didn't like 3 minute interviews. I was like, I don't want to talk to you for 3 minutes. Like, I really want to get into your story, and there's only so much you can learn about somebody in 3, 4 minutes of a time, if you even get that. And so, I, I was listening to a lot of podcasts that started to inspire me, and all of a sudden I was like, could I do this? Could I try this? And one day I had this audition that was extremely entertainment focused, and I just hated the premises so much. And I remember like crying that day, being like, this cannot be the deepest conversation I'm going to be having. And so it led to Human to Human, and just wanting to go deeper. And so, yeah, now the podcast has been going for about 5 seasons. We actually are launching a new season coming up in a few weeks here. And this season, we're particularly focusing on Black men, which has been such an incredible ride. It's been
Hmm.
a year of production, but it's been a journey nonetheless. And I'm excited to share those episodes and conversations. But yeah, just like I wanted to have conversations about the things I felt really vulnerable about, the things that I was nervous if anybody else is experiencing this. I was going through so many changes in my mindset, in my career path, in my personal life. Just like, I wasn't sure if what I learned was what I still wanted to, how I still wanted to keep moving in my life, whether it was in relationships and business and spirituality, all of it. Like, you go through that. You have to go through the turn of events. All of us do. Depends on when we do it. And that was just my time. And I felt a lot of like insecurity during that time of like, am I crazy? Is this just me? And I was like, it can't just be me. I'm gonna go figure it out if it's just me. And it's not, it can't be. So that's kind of how we got into those conversations.
Were your parents strict Christians when you were raised, or were they kind of just like every now and then? How are you specifically raised in terms of your faith and your beliefs?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't really like categorize it as strict because I was a part of it. It's not like they were making me do something. Like this was how I was raised. And like you come in so early to it that in that time, like when I look back, I'm like, that was a part of your journey. I had to really get to the point that I made sure that, not I made sure, but I recognized that it was a part of my journey. And now that I'm shifting, that's now a next part of my journey. But to answer your question more in depth, yeah, I was raised, I mean, church every Sunday, church 3 times a week, probably because I had parents who were in ministry in some way. My mom was, singing in the choir, leading the choir. My dad was one of the pastors or like, one of the substitute pastors. So, or an elder in the church as well. And so they had a responsibility in the church, which means that their kids kind of came along with them. And so I was very much in it. I went to youth conferences. I went to I led dance. I was just with some friends a few weeks ago and they were doing a dance routine and they're like, you taught us this, right? Like I used to be the dance teacher. Like I just laughed so much because I couldn't believe like they were like, yeah, that was you. I was in the choir, all of it. So yes, they were definitely, I was definitely a part of the full, church in terms of the responsibility element, as well as, yeah, like we were a family of faith and grew up where that was just how it was. And I didn't really question it until many, many years later, just figuring out like what part of this still felt authentic to me and what part of it really didn't anymore.
So, at what point did that start to change? What point did you start to question kind of your beliefs or just the way you were
Hmm.
raised?
So I think there was actually a few times that it happened, but I didn't let it unravel until maybe 6 years ago. But let's say like one of my first times was college, right? Because you are raised and when you're in high school or whatever, you're raised in the house, you think that life is one way. College, it's not necessarily about going to college specifically, but it's just a big opportunity to meet multiple types of people from all over the world. And that's how I felt when I went to college. Missouri is very different from Texas. And so when I went, I saw so many different types of people, so many types of religions. And I remember calling my mom once and being like, wait, like, there's a lot of other people out here. Why didn't you like warn me? And she's like, what are you talking about? And I couldn't necessarily judge their beliefs and their limited beliefs or their ways of seeing things. So I just was like, wait, what the heck? Like there's so many other people. And the type of personality I am, I'm very open. I want to get to know all these different types of people. I want to um accept and love all these different types of people. But I think sometimes the Christian faith has a way of, this is how it is, this is what's right, everything else is wrong.
And
And
condemning. Yeah, right.
yeah, and I just did not vibe with that. By the time I got to college, I was like, this feels weird. Like I'm meeting all these different types of people, whether there's the different sexual orientations or different religions or different just upbringing, all of it. And I was just so curious about them. So that was kind of the beginning. And then I remember taking a philosophy class and I didn't last 2 weeks. I like got out of it immediately. I was like, this is not Christian. Like I cannot be in this. This is not for me. And I left that philosophy class and I laugh about that today because I'm like, wow, you were so like hell bent on keeping your thinking the same way because if I didn't, it would break so much in me, and I was scared to find out what that was. And I think even God knew like she's not ready to like be exposed to the next level. So yeah, I like kind of paused there, and then let's say 10 years later, I'm in my late 20s and I'm going through just I'm reading a lot more now for fun, not just for work. And so I think you start reading a couple different books that opens you up to a couple different documentaries. I remember I was dating differently, and I was dating this guy at the time who wasn't Christian, which was a first for me. And I
Such a
remember,
no-no, such a rebel.
yeah, but at least I mean, I was so freaked out. I was like, oh my God, I like him, but this is crazy. This has got to be crazy. Like, it's just so crazy. So I remember calling one of my spiritual mentors at the time and being like, hey, look, I'm dating this guy and he's so lovely, but he's not Christian. So, like, I don't want God to be mad at me. And she said, I think you have a very parental relationship with God, and I think
Mhm.
you need to explore that. And I just broke wide open. And I think that was the beginning of like, what does that mean? Then it was a spiral and spiral and spiral after that. And one of my cousins started exposing me to a lot of different information. The guy I was dating at the time was exposing me to a lot of information. But the thing with him is he was so like, it was not like, hey, you should know all this. It was, hey, like you seem interested. Do you want me to share just things that I think about? Because he never judged or cared that I was Christian or like, didn't like something I was doing. I'd be like, hey, come to church with me. He's like, hey, that's not really my thing, but like after church, I'll pick you up, blah, blah. Like he was so supportive about it. And that was also a bit surprising because I was like, oh, for somebody who doesn't, who we're not necessarily in the same spiritual world, you're so supportive. And I kind of thought that would be harder. And it was pretty easy. And I was like, but he's so open, but sometimes you guys aren't open. What's that about? You know what I mean? And that was another part of the spiral. I'm like, wait, this person doesn't necessarily identify as Christian, but they are one of the kindest people I've ever met. Not to say that the Christians I knew weren't, but there was a lot more of like regulations and rules to sometimes the kindness. And I was just like, I don't like this. So, and that I never speak for everybody. There's no such thing as like everybody's the same in that way. And I obviously met and still I'm friends with so many of my friends from the Christian faith or like just growing up. But I did recognize things that I didn't love and I wanted to find out more about that.
So how old were you when you met this guy and when you sort of started having these revelations?
I was like 28.
Okay. So where did this take you then after you sort of had this relationship with this guy and he was kind of non-judgmental? Where did this take you?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't like it was multiple things. It was the spiritual leader saying your parental relationship. That was a huge ding. That was just such a huge ding for me. It was my cousin asking me deeper questions about the Christian faith and being like, have you actually studied? Do you actually know? Asking me questions that I was like, am I just walking? Am I unconscious about some of my beliefs and I don't know the backstories? It was that, and then it was the guy as well, and they were just kind of all happening at the same time. And where that took me was just down a very long, I mean, I'm still on the journey, really. It took me down a rabbit hole. Like I said, books, documentaries, questions, different people, traveling. I started traveling major after that because I was like, oh, I have to go see other people, other places, I have to figure out like how do other people live? How do other people do spirituality? Everywhere from Bali to Mexico to Europe, just trying to explore myself and explore the questions I had because I had so many questions after that. I mean, I was like, so if 2000 years ago, we've been saying 2000 years for how many years? Like, is that a real thing? Like, and then I started bringing it to my parents and then during the pandemic, I ended up coming to Houston and staying with my parents. And that's when like it was so much because I was growing and learning in front of them. And it was like a bit of a conflict, but it wasn't necessarily like on the religious tip. It was just like everything because that leads, if you kind of drive your life based on like one belief system and that belief system starts shattering, every other thing you do starts shattering too. And so it's
Mhm.
all shattering at the same time. And I can't stop it because I didn't prepare for it. I didn't know it was going to happen. And yeah, just so I read this amazing book called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. And I think I had just never felt so alive and understood and my questions just felt like they felt so normalized and important. And that book definitely opened me up to like just go down this journey, and it's okay. You're on the right path to be willing to question like whether you come back to the middle or not. Like God is not afraid of your questions. Because that was another thing. I was like, these too many questions should I not ask? This is probably why I didn't take the philosophy class, because I would have had a lot of questions in that class, and I was so unprepared for that. And so that's kind of like, yeah, I mean, and I'm still on that journey. I'm still discovering. I don't necessarily think I have as like late. I'm not really in a label season of it all
Hmm.
right now. And I have been looking to get back to a label, if I'm honest. Like part of me was like, okay, do I need a label again? Like because after I was telling people I wasn't Christian, because I would tell a few close friends, like, I don't think I'm Christian, but I'm definitely still spiritual and I love God and I love him even more now. And I don't, it's not a him or her or it's universe. And I was just talking in a way that I was even really surprised, but was so happy and was so open. And and there's no now, but to say that like I'm still on that journey is just more of my truth. Like I'm still learning, discovering, reading, and not putting a timeline on that.
So it seems like you were having an awakening experience. What were your parents thinking at this time? Were you sharing what you were learning or what you were realizing with your parents? And what was their reaction, being that they were so traditionally Christian?
Yeah, not really, honestly, because it was also a part of my healing journey to not feel like I needed to get anybody's approval or validation or input during such a sensitive and vulnerable time for me, because that is very sensitive and vulnerable to try to just continue to discover in a way that doesn't include other people's like dictations or mentorship or whatever. Or excuse me, I wouldn't say mentorship, but like, full like rule of thumb. Like
Hmm.
just, I definitely was getting mentorship, but I just thought that because I also recognized that it wasn't, I had no I was very lucky to feel like I didn't have any pain towards necessarily my parents or the church. I wasn't like mad or pissed at God or pissed at them necessarily. There were things that I was upset about that I didn't discover on my own, and I had to go through that. And that, had a lot of issues, but it wasn't about them. And so I just didn't really include them as much. I mean, they could see based on the fact that pretty we have a open relationship, but I think there are things about your relationship with your parents that is like, this one's for me. Just like they're like, this is
Hmm.
for us. And so I think this is one of those things where I was like, this is for me. Now you can obviously discover, like, I don't really go to church with my parents as often anymore. Like I rarely do really. I do if I just like am in the mood for that, because I'm still open to there's not like I didn't have the I hate the church moment or I hate this version of religion. I'm pretty grateful for that, because I think that there's a lot of extra, there's more pain to that, and I understand it deeply. I had friends that went through that version of it, and I totally get it, and I empathize very deeply. But I don't think that was necessarily my journey, so I didn't necessarily have to cut them off or cut, it wasn't that type of experience.
Or like they
So
didn't, or like it wasn't like they disapproved of you because you weren't following in the way they raised you,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. I mean, they were like, why aren't you going to church? And what's going on with it? Like, it was a lot of questions, but I just had to decide, like, do I want to deal with it or not? And that's why it was a sometime thing. Some days I didn't want to deal with it, and I just got dressed and went and was like, I don't want to deal with this. It's distraction to what I'm personally trying to deal with. So I would just be like, I can handle obliging because my mental health is in a good space, my spiritual health is in a good space, and this is just an experience. And this is about being some of it was about just like getting over the situation and not letting this escalate or be a big deal. And then sometimes like, okay, I don't mind going today. And then sometimes like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I need to stick to what I am comfortable with. So yeah, there's like the back and forth within myself, but I can still see that their heads were turning. I've had a few moments where my mom's like, what book are you reading? That's interesting. That's different. And I was just like, yeah, it is. And I would just keep going because I'm like, it's not that yet. Let me keep going through my journey without anybody's extra opinions.
Have you had any further conversations with them now that you're deeper in your journey, or are you still kind of hands off with how you relate to others in terms of your spirituality?
You mean specifically parents or
Like,
everybody?
yeah, I guess with your parents, let's start there first.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, so since you're deeper in your spiritual journey now, have you had any sort of conversations with them about your beliefs now?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes like, but the beautiful thing is sometimes they bring up things to me. Like sometimes my dad will say, yeah, the Bible said this, but I think we misinterpreted that. And I'll be like, tell me about that,
Hmm.
And he'll tell me something and I'll just be smiling in my head and be like, okay, cool. Like, because I don't expect them to be like, we're not Christian anymore, but I have enjoyed the different perspectives and the different gems that have come out of their even in their deepening their faith, saying we misinterpreted this, or I think the church took this too far, or this is about man, this wasn't what God said. Like I've heard a lot of that over the past 2 years, and I enjoy it and I sit and I listen and I add my 2 cents then, but I don't go out of my way to do it. Again,
Right.
I made it very clear within myself because I my family means a lot to me and their opinions have meant a lot to me over the years. And so I made sure that this was like I've seen myself completely doubt my walk based on just listening to them for like 5 minutes because they just had influence on me and they have influence on me and I'm aware of it. So I know when it's like this, protect this. This is just you. This is your moment. Be available for moments that shift and change. Or if there's a moment you want to share something, that's fine. But like again, I don't go out of my way. Not in this season.
So let me ask about your siblings. Are any of them on the same path you are, or is this just a unique journey that you're on right now? Or have you even had any conversations with your siblings?
I have had conversations with my siblings, and I do think it's more of a unique journey I'm currently on. But again, they're all, I don't wouldn't say like younger than me means that much, but I'm just thinking like maybe their time will be different than mine. Maybe it won't be their path. Maybe their path will be completely different. I've really taken back from trying to compare to every, like that's what I've enjoyed about it. I'm like, this is you. This is like something you, this is like this is about you becoming your more authentic self, not us having to match everything. That's what I love about interpersonal relationships. You can be really close relationship with somebody who has completely different belief systems than you, or it doesn't even have to be completely different. It can be just like somebody's adjacent, somebody's this way, somebody's that way, and you guys can still have a deep relationship. And that's actually a big part of what I'm practicing now. Like, I don't necessarily need everybody to be on the same path as me. I just want to be confident in my path. And that's what I needed for myself because I was very like, we grew up like this. This is how we think. And I'm like, no, we actually all came here individually. So
We
we're
did,
just
yeah.
assigned to each other. And like, this is amazing on this earth, but we're all energy and spiritual beings having a human experience. So like, this is my human experience and yours is different. Um, my siblings are all question askers, and I don't doubt that they will also continue to expand in their journeys. And I know that like my sister has particularly gone on this path before. But I rather, I don't know, I rather keep my individual path right now before checking in with everybody else's, because that's something I do as the eldest daughter a lot. Like, are we all doing this? I'm like, no, this is what I'm doing. So I'm just trying to focus on what I'm doing.
It sounds like you have a very accepting and like you're not trying to convert anyone to think that you kind of have an accepting way of existing that you live and let live kind of is your motto, kind of sort of what it sounds like.
Yeah. Yes, that was healing for me because I come from like, I mean, I'm a huge community person and I believe in community. And because that's a big part of the church, right? Like the belonging is matching faith and understanding each other and thinking the same way. And I just had to expand that. Like that's not my, that's, I belong to a lot of communities and I'm open to exploring that. And that is more of me than anything else. That's why I was having those questions at 18 when, it's like, oh, we don't believe in this person, convert this person, do this with this person. And I was like, that doesn't feel like all these billions of people can think that that does not make sense to me. So that's why I'm, in my path in this way, because I don't need to do all of that with everybody else. I just want to strengthen my human experience.
It seems like that's where it all starts. So it all starts with a question or two. Maybe that philosophy class that you took, it did like subconsciously have an effect on your thinking long term, but at the time you're like rejecting it, but deep down you kind of realize that it was time for you to shift in a new mode of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think about that class and laugh because I'm like, I literally could not have handled it at that time. Like, I was like, no, no, this is too far. And then I come back and I'm like, wow, I'm sure I would love to know what books that they read in that class. I'm sure I've either it's on my list or I've already read it or something like that. So it just cracks me up because I'm like, timing is everything. And our spiritual journeys, whatever they may be, have to be aligned with like what your consciousness, you know, can experience and is ready to experience and can expand to.
So you're still a storyteller. You still like to tell stories. How did you kind of merge your passion into your podcast, and what do you focus on with your podcast?
Curiosity, curiosity. I mean, the episode that you referenced was me asking questions. That was me trying to be like, hey, Jimmy, Billy, this is where I'm at. This is something I'm questioning. This is something I'm nervous about. This is something I'm unsure about. What are your thoughts? I think everybody's an expert in their lived experience. And so every single person that comes on the show, I'm so excited to be and curious about their journey, whether it's with mental health, with spirituality, with interpersonal relationships, with career path. Like I focus on curiosity and connection and connecting the human experience because I think, like I said in the beginning, when I was going through some changes, I thought I was alone in those things. And I was like, there's no way that you are not unique in this way, that everybody has experienced some type of question asking, some type of like, woe is me, what's happening? Where am I at in the world? What does this all mean? We've had those questions before. And I want to know what other people went through when they had those questions. What did it feel like? What were their transitions? How did they build their self-trust, their worthiness? Especially because it is innate, but in society, society does a good job of trying to pull us away from our worthiness. And I'm not feeling that. So I was like, how do I use the podcast to connect our stories, connect our journeys? Exactly. They might not, look the same, but the undertones, we're all dealing with the same thing: vulnerability, shame, purpose, learning, self-trust. Like we're all disappointment, anger, passion, whatever. We're
Fear,
all
yep.
of fear. We're all, I mean, this is the human experience. And so that is what I focus on the show, like discovering the human experience, connecting it, asking questions about it, investigating it. Um, Being willing to see the other side of it, the nuances of it. Yeah, and it brings me a lot of joy and a lot of healing.
So at any point were you sort of feeling that you were going crazy? How did you question kind of what you were thinking or feeling at the time?
I mean, how did I question it?
Yeah, did you ever think, man, this information, am I going crazy? Like, how did you kind of process what you were learning at the time?
Mm. With the community. My best friend at the time, we happened to be going through it at the exact same time. And that was crazy. That was so important because, and that's why when you're talking about like parents and siblings, it's like I didn't have to lean on them during that time because there were other people that were literally on the same path as me. And so I just went where it made sense versus trying to shake all the trees. And it made sense at the time. So her and I were kind of exploring at the same time, and we spent a lot of hours on the phone, spent a lot of hours talking and crying and journaling and question asking and repeating that cycle over and over again for probably a year and a half. And that a lot of that was so important to the processing of it all because I mean, of course, there's a lot of alone time and in that way, I'm a big voice noter. I process a lot of my thoughts to talking it out through just trying to say the words, without a filter. I process a lot through journaling. I process a lot through those community conversations. I talk to my cousin a lot. I talk to my friend a lot. And we just gave each other so much space to be like, and what about this? And what about that? And is that connected? Like to do all of that. That was really, I mean, now I say it was fun, but at the time it was hell because I just was like, we're never going to get out of this rabbit hole. Like and then at that time I had very much like, I wasn't really, I was out of the rat race of like trying to be productive and the capitalist thing. It was 2020. So like we had this permission slip to slow down and I took it very, very seriously. I slowed down completely. And this was kind of all I was thinking and talking about. And it made it very hard for me at the time to go back to like anything. I was like, what is there to go back to? Like, this is the only thing that matters, blah, blah. Like, I really, it was like 2 years of that. And then I was like, whoa, like, okay, I have to like work, I guess. So it was just kind of figuring out constantly trying to align to things that felt aligned to what I was experiencing, discovering what was important to me, what I thought mattered in this lifetime. And, I'm very grateful to human to be a place where I can kind of pour in a lot of that because, like I said, like I don't think I could have, there's so many things I'm like, I haven't been able to go back to like certain events or certain, and it's just because of where I decided like that's not the place that gives me either the highest return or I don't feel like I actually contribute in the same way anymore. And so, yeah, a lot of the processing was with community and like journal, some of those self-care methods that I still use today.
So let me ask you this. A lot of folks, as they're going through a spiritual awakening, they're able to unlock gifts, like their intuition kind of unlocks. Have you had any of those kind of experiences yet?
That's a great question. Wow. I
Third
mean,
eye opens, Kundalini, anything like that?
I think my wisdom, just wisdom in general, has completely expanded.
Hmm.
Emotional intelligence has expanded. Intuition is definitely there as well. I'm always strengthening in my intuition because I think during that time I went through a lot of doubt with self-trust.
Hmm.
So much doubt about like, you mean this was around the corner this whole time and it took me this long to figure it out and like blah blah blah. And like I went through a lot of that. And now that I'm so much more forgiving and compassionate about like the journey is the journey and there's no timeline to it, it has definitely unlocked a level of intuition and connection to energy that I believe is going to continue to be strengthened. I know it will because I'm continuing to stay locked into that and to be curious about it and to continue to explore it and dive deeper and fine tune. I do think sometimes intuition and fear can have a tight relationship. And so I'm always like, is this fear or is it like have to be such an investigator of my emotions and my thoughts and just willing to stay on that journey? So I know that I believe intuition was definitely a product of that. And I believe it'll still be strengthened more and more um, as my human experiences continue to grow and just align. Yeah.
Yeah, I think women have a natural intuition as well that they naturally inherently have as well.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so I guess how have your beliefs changed? Like, do you still hold on to your core Christian beliefs, or kind of have you moved away from that sort of box?
Yeah, I'm out of the box, but don't I don't think that I threw everything away from the Christian beliefs. I believe that like some of those things, those principles are still real, especially in this reality. I just maybe execute them differently, right? Like when it says like love your neighbor, like I take that very seriously. I'm not
Hmm.
saying other people don't. I'm just saying like, okay, that is a very clear statement about love and openness and acceptance and self-compassion, and that maybe execute a little bit differently. I'm not walking around trying to like holding the responsibility that if I don't convert somebody into Christianity, they're going to hell. Like that's something I don't carry as anymore. But it
Hmm.
burden I had growing up. I always felt like our job is to do XYZ. And I was like,
We
that's
got
not
to
our
preach the word to all the inhabited earth.
that
Hmm.
is really, and I don't judge it. I just don't not need to carry it anymore. That's like really for me, I don't need to carry things that's not how I will exhibit God's love.
Gotcha. So I have a couple of speed round questions that I like to ask all my guests. And the first one is, what does awakening mean to you?
Ooh, what does awakening mean to you? Ooh, ooh, wow. That is such a good question. What does awakening mean to you? I'm sorry, I know it's a speed round. It means it means so much. It means authenticity. It means love. It means love. I think there's a lot of lack of love, self-love and love for the world when you are not fully awake. I would
Mhm.
say it means love.
Next question is, what's the most valuable lesson that you learned so far in life?
Hmm. It's the most valuable lesson I've learned in life.
These must be great
Maybe,
questions.
hmm?
So like these must be great questions.
Well, I just want to be thoughtful in my answers, and yes, they are. But I want to be thoughtful. Treat others the way you would want to be treated.
Okay, very good. Last question is, what would be your advice to someone who is going through a spiritual awakening? What would you share with them if they're starting to question things or they're just not thinking things are aligning?
Don't be afraid of who you're going to become on the other side. Do not be afraid. I know that it's scary, but do it scared. That was what I was afraid of. Who am I going to be on the other side of that question? You're allowed to live through the question. You're allowed to ask the question. You're not at fault. You are, you will not be judged. You will not be reprimanded. You should you dive and lean even deeper to the uncomfortability. There's something there for you. There's a lesson. There's a new beginning. There's something. Dive into it. It's like, do not be afraid of who you're going to be on the other side.
Thank you so much. So, is there any website or anything that you'd like to plug as we conclude?
Sure, sure. To keep in touch with me, I'm on Instagram at One Take Stace. I'm also have the podcast Human to Human with Stacy Ike. That's on Instagram as well, and then on YouTube, One Take Stace. You guys can check out. We have several new episodes coming down the pipeline over the next week, so I'm really excited to share that with people as well. So yes, please keep in touch with me all over there. And I'm on Substack. I'm writing a lot through this journey as well on Substack. So yeah, you can find me there at Stacy Ike. The Substack is called Somewhere in Between, which is a big part of my journey right now.
Stacy, I want to say congratulations in going on this journey, being brave enough to embark on this journey. And I see so many parallels between your life and mine, between the journalism career and everything else. So I just want to thank you for sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the beautiful questions and for the time.